Hello there, and welcome to the Get French Football News preview show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Adam White and Samuel Rooke. We're going to jump straight into things this evening, but do remember that all your latest world news in the world of French football, I apologise, is on our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com, and follow us on Twitter as well on GFFN for all the latest that you need. We'll start this evening with the Coupe de France final, which we all hoped might have a little bit of an upset. And while it didn't quite live up to that, Adam, that at least Les Herbiers weren't embarrassed in the 2-0 defeat that saw Paris Saint-Germain connect with another domestic treble, their third in 4 seasons. And in fact, they've only lost 2 out of those trophies out of the last 5 years, which is an incredible feat for any club, but obviously the financial gulf helps that. But let's focus on the game itself first. It was pretty one-sided, but at the same time, for Les Herbiers' point of view, at least it only was 2 goals, and they kept the scoreline very respectable for themselves.
Yeah, they did. I think that there's sort of 2 ways to look at this game. One, you could argue that it was a bit of a training match, and I can understand that why you would make that assertion, but and because PSG had, as expected, as they do in plenty of their games, not just against sort of third position, had plenty all of the ball, all the chances. They hit the post 3 times in the first 20 minutes. They could have won by much more than 2 goals. But I think that you could also take the position that Les Herbiers came and played football when they had the chance. Obviously, they're under severe amounts of pressure, and you wouldn't expect them to play sort of to counter PSG and play them necessarily at their own game. But when they got the ball, they passed it around. They tried to play as expansive as they could get away with. They didn't have too many chances, but they looked good, and they deserved not to concede as many as they might have. I think a couple of players really stood out. Flochon in midfield Sebastian Flochon was fantastic for them, and the goalkeeper, of course, Pico, was some fantastic saves and very nearly saved Cavani's penalty. And both deserved huge credit for their performances on what is comfortably the biggest stage either of them would have, or any of the team would have. I imagine anyway would have played at. Given that the third tier is sort of technically semi-pro. And the attendances are pretty small too, so they did themselves with a lot of credit, and I think that they really did play their part in this game. PSG won comfortably, of course, but there was a sense at 1-0 that when PSG missed a number of chances, they said they hit the post so many times, and they had the goal disallowed with VAR, Di Maria, I think it was. That there was a sense that maybe if they just got one chance for Zerbias, they might nick something, but that didn't arrive. They conceded that penalty, and any sort of hope then was extinguished. But I enjoyed the game, especially the first half. So I think a huge credit to Les Herbiers, and credit to PSG as well. They've won the last 8 domestic cups. You can't really argue with that.
Yeah, it's very difficult to argue with that. The record they've had is pretty astounding. I mean, like I said, going back 5 years, it's only been the win for Guingamp in the Coupe de France back in 2013 that stopped the domestic cup competition streak, at least anyway. There was that Monaco victory last season in Ligue that stopped that streak, at least anyway. But it's a tremendous period of dominance, really, for them, Sam, that maintained them over that game as well. They did feel a little bit more. It was always going to be a little bit one-sided, given the money gulf in it more than anything. And it's another trophy to add to the mantelpiece, another trophy for Unai Emery to put on his CV, at least for the next job that he's planning on taking after leaving in the summer. But at the same time, is this, and this is a bit of a wider question, really, Adam, for the state of Ligue 1, really, that, like Adam said, it's been 4 seasons in a row that they've won both domestic cup competitions. Can someone break that stranglehold next season? Maybe does a focus on the Champions League push PSG maybe to rest players more often in these cup competitions, or is the competition, unfortunately, in Ligue 1 a little bit too weak to really even match against Paris Saint-Germain resting a few players in these kind of cup games?
I mean, I don't think you can rule it out. You can't say that it's unwinnable and PSG will just win everything forever. Obviously, Lyon have shown this season, Marseille have shown, even some of the smaller teams have shown they can take it to PSG sort of on their day. So, and the nature of cup competitions is that you have to turn up in every game, in every leg. And, if PSG take their eyes off the prize once or twice. They could have lost if Marseille had played as well when they played PSG in the Cup as they did when they played them the first time in the league this season. They could well have knocked them out, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be saying, "Well, look at this. It's been Marseille versus Les Herbiers in the final." And it really was a fine margins. They didn't turn up, Marseille, and they got thrashed by PSG. But that it could have happened, and that could happen anytime. If we talk about the league, that's where it becomes a more difficult thing to see anyone really stopping PSG. Even if they do rotate, as you say, the depth of the squad is just ludicrous. I mean, there's stories again today that FFP might sort of might force PSG to sell some players. There's all these rumors about Neymar leaving, but even if you take 2 or 3 or 4 of PSG's best players out of the side, they still have far and away the most talented team. Whoever the new manager is, probably Tuchel. He'll be desperate to add some trophies on his CV in the same way that Emery has done. It's hard to see them letting up, even if they are just chasing the Champions League. But yeah, I mean, I think there's reason to believe that someone can break the stranglehold, at least in the cups.
Yeah, because it seems like the Ligue 1 dominance would never really end. But at the same time, I suppose the thinking would be that the other teams don't really focus on the cup competitions themselves. That a lot of them, the bigger teams, again, Marseille, Lyon, and Monaco, were all fighting for the Champions League places instead. Some of the more middle table sides, I'm thinking of a Rennes or a Saint-Etienne or a Bordeaux, maybe just sort of get caught up in those games when they do face a bigger side, and then they sort of lose the ground there. That's why they're sort of successful, and that's why sometimes PSG end up strolling to some of these competitions. But I just wanted to talk, Adam, and I think a lot of English fans would be thinking about this one really, because it is a strange sort of half tradition, shall we say, really, with smaller clubs in Coupe de France games that I remember back in 2000 as well, with was it Calais against Nantes? I believe it was from memory, and I think it was back in the one that Lyon won back in 2011-12, where they played Kivet as well, where they have the captain of the opposition help lift the trophy, which is on one hand a nice moment for players that may never ever get anywhere near that kind of level, but at the same time, for English fans, it feels a little bit like a slap in the face in a way.
Yeah, it's very very unusual. I think there's a lot to be said for the gesture, and it's, I don't think it's meant as a slap in the face. Obviously, that it could be interpreted, but I don't think that Thiago Silva or anybody at PSG should be criticised for that, given that it's a tradition in France. It might not be a tradition here. We would think it was a bit odd to do that for like the FA Cup final. So that the biggest gap, maybe Swansea Bradford, the League Cup final, maybe a couple of years ago. If that had happened then, maybe that would have been a bit sort of, in England anyway, it would have seemed a bit patronising. But I think, given that it's you mentioned those other occasions, and it was a nice moment because the gap is bigger than at least the gap in perhaps exposure, maybe, and not necessarily quality, but there really are worlds apart. When you look at the lower leagues in England and Germany, there are teams in the 3rd and 4th division that get 20,000 a week, whereas beyond Ligue 2 in France, although there's a lot of quality players below that level, they're semi-pro and they play in front of very small crowds. This is a huge moment for Les Herbiers. The equivalent 3rd division team in England or Germany, would be professional and have a strong support and probably a strong history of their own. And not that Les Herbiers don't, but there's sort of a different culture between France and obviously between every footballing country. There's different culture, and I think fair enough to sort of hold with that tradition. And I thought it was a nice moment, really.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? It just looks kind of strange, and you see the captain as Les Herbiers sort of look at it and think, do I really want to do this for that moment? I mean, it's something to write to your grandkids about, at least anyway, if this career doesn't take off for any reason or whatever. But at the same time, it just, I don't know. I think you're right, Adam. I think it's obviously a French thing, but I think the Englishmen in me and some other European countries might not be so graceful towards their opponents. At least it was. I think from the gulf between the two, it's quite a nice moment. But at the same time, it feels like if I was asked that question, I would not be lifting that trophy in any means of form. Let's move on to the Ligue 1. matters that's going to happen this weekend, because it's another big weekend, especially at those at the bottom, because games are running out and teams are running out of time as well. It's the penultimate weekend, so there's only 2 games left. So let's start with, well, everyone plays on Saturday at least anyway, except from Guingamp and Marseille, who will play on Friday night. So let's focus on Toulouse first, who have to go to Bordeaux, which is no easy place to go to at the moment, because Bordeaux are in a pretty good run of form at the moment, really. They've won 3 of their last 4. Obviously, extend that further, 4 of the last 5 after the victory at the weekend, and they are, the only defeat was against Paris Saint-Germain, which is not the worst way to really go out. And they've started scoring again. They've scored 3 in their last 5 as well at the same time. They've been a tough nut to crack after a bit of a dry spell under Gus Poyet and starting so well in the first 3 games. But for the more important team in this one, Sam, is Toulouse. Obviously, they've been on an awful run of form, and they were the wrong side of a big game last weekend that has dropped them into that relegation playoff place. Now they're 2 points above Troyes and the dotted line for the automatic places, and yes, they're still a point away from Strasbourg and Lille. Apologies, that we'll come to those in a moment. But yeah, they're in a torrid run of form. They've only had 1 win themselves since early February when they beat Nice. There's been a lot of draws. There's been a lot of chances for them. A couple of close defeats. That one last weekend, though, was a big body blow that could really, if they can't bounce back against a Bordeaux side that have nothing to play for at least, but are in good form, it's going to be an uphill battle for them, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, if they can't bounce back here, this is their last chance. I mean, they can't bounce back and win. Ideally, even a draw will, as we say, we see how the sort of other fixtures shake out. A draw could get them out of 18th place, maybe, but realistically, they need to win to avoid being in the relegation playoff scenario. But it's just very difficult to imagine how you can pick yourself up after the last 2 games. Really, I mean, back-to-back games losing to 10 men. Admittedly, the red cards came very late and it probably didn't affect the games so much. But it's got to be difficult when you're looking back over your last couple of fixtures and thinking like, we've lost 2 games in a row to teams with 10 men. We've lost in heartbreaking fashion. I mean, 2-1 up against Lille at home. You're thinking, well, that's Toulouse. That's job done. But they found a way to lose that one, and it's something they've done consistently this season. They found a way to drop points. They found a way to lose games they shouldn't have done, and that's why they find themselves in the position they're in. I mean, it's a relatively easy solution. Beat a Bordeaux team who basically have nothing to play for, and you're safe. But fail to do so, and you're in the relegation playoff, or worse, or they're down. And if they do go down, that's going to be a big problem. I mean, this is a serious football club. It's a big football club with, there are a lot of fans. Toulouse is a big city, and to lose their football side to Ligue 2 would be a huge blow to the city as well as it would be to the club itself.
Yeah, they're teetering upon it now, Adam. Really, it's been a tough old season, and it really, relegation to Ligue 2 will be astronomically bad, given that we've mentioned a few times that even if they stay in Liga next season, we're thinking Lafont will go, Diop will go. There's unrest in the dressing room as well with Maxime Gradel recently as well. So really, relegation at this point, while it won't be great at any time really, ahead of schedule, shall we say? Maybe it's not the right way of putting it, but from what we're anticipated at least a couple of weeks ago, it makes it even worse. The negotiating point for those players and the prices goes down because they clearly will not want to be playing Ligue 2 football next season, and that impacts them financially and their ability to come back up. And they struggle to get a big stadium full every week as it is, with obviously it being more of a rugby town, but it was nice and full at the weekend. But it all becomes more and more complicated the more you think that if they can't get a result against a Bordeaux side that have been in great form as well, even though they don't have much to play for, which is kind of a freedom sometimes for mid-table sides that people forget about, that if they don't get a result here, they're in real trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you make a good point about the sort of not the size of the club, because they're a club that deserve to be in Ligue and historically, but the fact that it's a rugby town and the fact that not that the club would sort of disappear if they got relegated, but
attendances. I think under Alan Casanova, before Dupraz took over, attendances were dropping into sort of 8,000-9,000, which would be put them in sort of one of the lowest in Ligue, and like Monaco are sort of a bit lower than that, but it would put them pretty near the bottom of that table. And dropping to Ligue 2, and you'd probably see it drop even below that, which obviously for a team like Toulouse, that is important revenue. Obviously they're a club that perhaps would fall into the bracket of developing players as a sort of a way of sustaining themselves to sell them on, and they might get Lafont and Diop, but they probably will get them both at pretty significant prices. But as you said, staying in Ligue 1 is important to that sort of ambition. They get relegated, and it cuts a couple of million maybe off both price tags. So they're playing for more than just their Ligue 1 status. They're sort of playing for the medium term future of the club, because if they were to go down, can they attract the players to get them up? Again, Ligue 2 is a very difficult league to get out of. I know that the playoffs have come in and made it a little bit easier in the last couple of years. Well, possibly not last season, but this season now the third, fourth, and fifth get into the playoffs, and there's a quarterfinal, a semi-final, and then there's the final between the third bottom team in Ligue 1 and and whoever wins those playoffs in Ligue 2. So still difficult. It's a very competitive division. So I think Strasbourg won it last year and lost 10 games. So, it's a very even league. So it's not a walkover by any means. So get relegated here, and they probably wouldn't be reappearing in Ligue 1 for a number of years. I think either way, whether they stay up, whether they go down, it's the next managerial appointment that would be the real crucial thing. Obviously Dupraz worked for a certain amount of time, and they're disappointed this season. But I'm not sure that De Bev is the man to necessarily stay into next year. It feels like he's a little bit of a sort of a placeholder until the summer, and keep them up, and then we'll go from there. But they've had some pretty terrible managerial appointments in the past. Casanova didn't really pan out. I know he saved them for relegation, but that was kind of it. They sort of tailed off again, and they can't keep doing that. It's not really sustainable. So they need to sort of think about whether they want to go as a club and how they're going to get there, and who is the right manager to take them there. And whether that's in Ligue 2 or Ligue 1, that'll probably be the determining factor as whether we see Toulouse as mid-table challenging for Europe in the next 2 or 3 years, or mid-table in Ligue 2.
Yeah, I think that's the saving grace for a number of these sides that are looking at possibly getting into the relegation playoff, because of the changes that's happened this year. With the sort of the only one that I can think of that's similar is the Scottish one does the same sort of tiered structure, doesn't it? With the sort of quarter-final, then semi-final, then final. So while maybe some might argue that gives a team momentum in a cup competition, at the same time, I think I'd rather be Toulouse that's had a bit of a rest and had plenty of time, and a team's possibly had to go through another double leg before they even have to face the team that they take on who finish third from bottom in Ligue 1. It's a much safer possibility for them, and the hope is that, like you say, I do sort of worry for Toulouse, not in terms of financially. I think they'll be fine in terms of if they end up in Ligue 2, but in terms of bounce back ability, it might be a real struggle should they slip through the trap door. Let's get some predictions on this one. We'll leave Bordeaux a little bit out of this one, I'm afraid. They don't have too much to play for. There's an outside chance of maybe European spots, but a lot of results have to go their way, and I just can't quite see it. But they have finished the season nicely under Gus Poyet, and he'll be looking forward to the next season and showing what he can do, at least at this level. Sam, what do you think the result will be?
I could see Toulouse pulling off a draw. I think it'd be 1-1.
Adam?
Unfortunately, I think Bordeaux might still fancy that European place. So I think Bordeaux might win this 2-0. Toulouse, traditionally this season, are terrible away from home. So Bordeaux 2-0 for me.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you, Adam, on that one, 2-0. I think it feels like Bordeaux are one of those strange mid-table sides that, with the freedom off them, makes them play even better. So them being able to do that and having still a sniff at a European spot, although it would take a lot of teams. There's still 3 teams between them and 6th place, so there would have to be a number of little bits of movements for them to get in there at least anyway. On to the next team that obviously played Toulouse last weekend in Lille, who got the massive result that finally lifts them off the bottom 2 of the table. They've been there for a long while. They hadn't won a game before that. They obviously won the game before Toulouse against Metz, but before then, not one in January. Now it's 2 on the trot back to back. They face a Dijon side this weekend as well that have not got the greatest away form this season, is maybe putting it a little bit lightly. If they didn't have that home form, they'd be in relegation form. But as for Lille, Sam, we sort of wrote them off a little bit when they had the incident with the fans on the pitch, and the fact that they seem to be demoralised by that. But then they get the win against Metz that gives them that glimmer of hope. They get an excellent comeback victory against Toulouse. Yes, there was a little bit of help from Alban Lafont, especially in the third goal, and they sort of battled themselves back into it at least. But a terrific result for them, a terrific win, and then heading into a game that's certainly winnable, and one that, if they get a victory, would pretty much, unless obviously Troyes win, and they've got a difficult game that we'll talk about in a moment as well, could see they're safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite a miracle. I think if Metz had stayed up, that would have been a miracle, but this is the next nearest thing to that Lille currently look like they're going to survive. Which is remarkable, absolutely remarkable, from how just listless and terrible they looked and how lost, and to get these back-to-back wins, games you have to win. This is what we talk about. They call them relegation 6-pointers, call them what you want, but these are the games you need to win, and they're the games that Lille have gone and won twice in a week. It's a remarkable turnaround, and maybe that means that some of what's left over of this club, assuming they stay up, there's going to be something to build on going forward next season. So many young players. We talk about how they've got such a young squad. There's plenty of talent there. There's plenty of quality there. They've had an awful season, but if they can survive this and just look at, just forget it and move on, build on what's left and advance, because it's been an awful season, but amazingly right now they look like they're going to be safe.
Yeah, and credit to Christophe Galtier that's maybe just about pulled something together from this team, and there's players like Nicolas Pepe, who's been in excellent form in the second half of the season. You look at the likes of Motiba's come in recently and put in some nice performance. Yves Bissouma has got that excellent goal at the weekend as well. But Adam, what we kind of keep forgetting in these moments is the financial issues that Lille are in. Obviously, they needed to sell players in January, and they ended up not doing so with Amadou almost at the door, but they ended up keeping him instead. It doesn't look like they, in the summer, where if they do stay up, they might still be relegated by the DNCG if Gerard Lopez can't prove the funds that he has, that seems to have been from external parties, at least, that he sort of controlled. That's still kind of hanging over their head, so it would be a positive that they will look like they can stay up, and if they get a victory here, at least from automatic relegation point of view, they should stay up then. But it won't quite lift the X above their head until something later in the summer.
Yeah, it's they've got a sort of Damocles sort of hanging over their head a little bit, even if they stay up. And I think that's probably, that's not necessarily being talked about too much. Because for a couple of reasons, I guess, just because the focus has to be on staying up in a sort of a sporting sense, and secondly because the DNCG are very, very harsh and very strict, unusually considering the suspension rules for players in France, which is pretty lax. For some reason, if you get booked for if you get booked 3 times in 10 games. After the third booking, you're allowed to play the next game, then you're suspended, which is bizarre. But apart from that, the DNCG are uncharacteristically strict, and this is not the first time they threatened to relegate someone. In fact, I think when Troyes promoted the time before this time, they were told they'd be relegated, and they had to sell Corentin Jean, I think, to Monaco, and then loan him back to make up the deficit. So, it's not uncommon for these sort of threats, if you like, to be made. There is that, but even so, I'm not sure that given the reports on Gerard Lopez's funds, whether he will be able to satisfy the DNCG, and whether that relegation may end up happening anyway. So it's probably a bigger threat than perhaps other teams have experienced in this sort of financial kind of purgatory, if you like, for often promoted teams, or Bastia as well, or another one that had a similar issue a couple of seasons ago with their budget not coming up to scratch. But it's definitely going to be sort of a subplot into the summer, and it wouldn't surprise me if Lille weren't able to come through that sort of reckoning and ended up relegated. Even if they win, that they could end up finishing sort of almost mid-table if they win the last 2 games, but it might not be enough, and it'd be interesting to see how that pans out over the summer months.
And that's the frustration for the fans, at least, anyway, and probably a lot of their players, that they're all their good work might be undone, because I do worry for them if they do end up relegated, especially for financial reasons. You have to think that maybe that's the point where investors and Lopez think about pulling out, and then where does that leave them really without, owning the stadium? As many French clubs don't really. They don't get that sort of extra revenue either. It does start to put the cobblers up a little against them. And I'm very quickly mention Dijon, who we have mentioned a few times this season, who really have had an excellent season. I know it's based a lot off their home form, and they got another good, solid home win last weekend to add to the multitude they've had this season. But a terrific job by Delalio this season, and in his striders. They play entertaining football. They're not afraid of going out there and attacking teams, but at the same time, they are awful away from home. They proved it time and again this season, which leads perfectly into the predictions for this one. Adam, what do you think?
It's a difficult one. I think Lille. 2-1.
Sam?
Yeah, I think Adam's right. It's very difficult to predict. I mean, Lille are the second worst team in the division at home. Dijon are terrible away. They're both middle of the form table. It probably comes down to who, to lean on a cliche, wants it more. Lille, obviously, something to play for. Dijon, not so much. So I'll go with the same. I think 2-1 Lille.
Yeah, I think we'll make it a trifecta on that one. It just feels like Lille can't not concede at the same time as Dijon are pretty awful away and will definitely concede on their end as well. And maybe Lille and just nick it in there. Managed to somehow have clawed themselves out of danger. On to a team that are right in the thick of things now, really, because of that result last weekend, and that's Troyes, who head to Montpellier this weekend, and it's not going to be an easy game against one of the stickiest teams in Ligue 1, although they sort of fifth place, sixth place challenges sort of faded a little bit. Again, they would need results to go their way to try and claw back into that scrap for the Europa League, but focusing on Troyes, really. And then they got that really good result a couple of weekends ago against Caen, where we thought that they were dead and buried. It was the game they had to win, and they won it. And we also thought that maybe this game against Lyon, if they can show something, maybe they could steal a little bit of a point. They'd done well against other strong teams in the last couple of weeks, although come up short. Unfortunately, they were sort of romped by another excellent performance by Bruno Genesio's side, but it does leave Troyes in a bit of a muddle now. They are 19th in the other automatic relegation place, with Metz already down there. 2 points adrift to Toulouse, 3 off Strasbourg and Lille and safety. It's beginning to look hard where they'll get the points from. I mean, away to Montpellier is not the kind of game you want to play this weekend, and next weekend they have to face a Monaco side that will still probably need at least a victory to ensure Champions League football. They are right in the mire of things, and if results do go against them this season, this weekend, they could even be relegated as well. It's backs against the walls kind of stuff, but this is not the game you really want to try and be all out attacking against.
No, exactly. And I think honestly, Troyes have kind of come to the end. That win against Caen was, you're right, they had to win really to have any chance. But even then, results really haven't gone their way. I think the best they could have hoped for was third bottom in the relegation playoff. And the Lille win last weekend, or the last 2 weekends, have really, really sort of, I think they've pretty much relegated them, really. When you look at their final 3 games, and they had Lyon away, that they are the bare bottom of the away table, by the way, even worse than Dijon and Strasbourg and Toulouse, who are terrible away from home too. But Troyes have only got 8 points away from home this season. They've got to go to Lyon last week, and they obviously lost that game. They've got to go to Monaco, I think, next weekend as well. They're home to Monaco as well in their final game. So, they're slightly better given they're at home. But the trip to Montpellier this weekend as well, another difficult away trip. Who Montpellier are going to, pretty stoic, pretty capable of shutting up shop when they want to. And if Montpellier get the lead, which you imagine they might, given that they need to win to keep pace of the Europa League, then I don't see Troyes coming back. So the final 3 games have kind of really played out pretty poorly for them, and that Lille sort of mini run of form seems to have relegated them. One thing I would like to highlight is Benjamin Nive has been brilliant in the last few weeks. He was brilliant against Caen. For 41-year-old, he's been unbelievable really this season, given that, especially since February time, he's really, always has been a leader of that team, but has really sort of grabbed them by the scruff of the neck. And without him, they probably wouldn't be even in this position. So if he retires at the end of the year, or he may get out, I could think he'd play another season in League quite happily, to be honest, given how he's played so far, this year. But huge credit to him. He's probably been their best player this year, which kind of says quite a lot. Although Christopher Horrell's been very good in defence too. He won't be there next season. But so big heads off to Nive. But I think even the 2-point gap is too much to make up to Toulouse. I think they're gone.
Yeah, and it's a little bit better, at least from a couple of years ago. Sam, they seem like France's yo-yo club, really, jumping between the divisions as frequently as they like, and they did well against Lorient in the playoff last season. But there's a couple of little glimmers of hope, at least for what has been successful this season. They've put off some excellent results. They had that, I remember that good draw against Monaco as well, which maybe gives them hope in that final game. But at the same time, they've got some players that probably will stay in Liga next season, and one in particular, Samuel Grandsir, has been linked with the Monegasque club for next season, although he's had a decent season. You think of Hunyun Suk as well, has scored 6 goals. He's been patchy but decent at the same time. At least this time, even if they do end up going down this weekend, it's not as been the dramatic embarrassment it was a couple of years ago, where they had the 9-0 against Paris Saint-Germain. They had a terrible start to the season. They never really got going. They always looked like goners, and they never looked like they could even perform the great miracles like maybe a Metz did, tease at least a couple of times this season. But that'll be the thing that takes them. If they do go down, that will be what gives them heart for maybe next season building again, and knowing that they at least know how to get out of Ligue 2, but maybe not how to stay in Liga.
I mean, that's the thing. They came into this season with the 19th biggest budget in the league, only slightly bigger than Amiens, who have the smallest. They're fighting against so many teams who are bigger and more established and everything else, and they have given a much better account of themselves this time. And, I think they probably do have the right framework in place to take a relegation in stride and to come back again, come back stronger. And, given how much they've improved on their previous attempt at Ligue 1, this time they're still not down. They could survive. I mean, it's against them. It doesn't look good, but they could survive. To keep themselves alive to the last day of the season, which I think they at least will do that, given the fixtures their rivals have around them. I don't think they'll be relegated till the final day, if at all. You've got to be happy with that. Given the constraints that a club like Troyes have, they're not like so many of the teams around them. Lille, even Strasbourg, who are a bigger club with a bigger budget. Those clubs are disappointed to be where they are. Troyes, this is basically where you'd expect them to be, and you've got to be reasonably happy with how the season's gone for them.
Yeah, at least they've still got a chance, and we can't write them off just yet. It's just facing that side against Montpellier, who are as stubborn as they come, really, this season, is maybe the best way of playing it. And I think Michel Desicarian will openly admit how much he makes his teams very, very tough to break down and score against. I mean, 31 goals this season is absolutely incredible. I mean, there's only one team better than that, and that is Paris Saint-Germain, and it's not even by that much. It's only by 4 goals. They're an incredible side, and they can be really great on the counter attack through players like Roussillon and Aguilar on the other wing as well. The sort of wing backs giving them great speed and great penetration, and they were really good last week. I remember Kean Dolly's goal as well, finally getting off the mark, and Isaac Mpenza scoring that the one that really sank. Not in the end. They really can be really I say exciting. 34 goals doesn't sound exciting, but at times they can be really difficult to take down when they are on the counter and they find spaces. If Troyes having to get desperate, it could really end poorly for them. But let's get some predictions, and I'll start with you, Sam. What do you think?
It just seems like what you just described is what we'll see. We'll see Troyes trying, and we'll see them crashing against the rocks and then getting done on the break. And I think Montpellier probably win at 1-0.
Adam?
Yeah, agreed. 1-0 for Montpellier for me.
I'm going a little bit more dire in a 2-0 victory again for Montpellier. I think the script that they read against Nantes last weekend, who were on a terrible slide, really, that's exactly what's going to happen again. They're just going to soak up all that pressure and use it against Troyes in the end, and possibly push them down into Ligue 1 if only if further results don't go their way, at least anyway, they might still have a fighting chance. Because one team that's been dragged into this, and they have a really difficult game this weekend, is Strasbourg, who we've mentioned a few times have sort of sleepwalked into the end of the season, into this relegation battle. And we've mentioned a few times that maybe other teams had done little to know that they might just be the odd one out, and that teams might just sort of lose themselves, and Strasbourg will still remain on top. But now they're mired in it, with other teams facing teams without anything to play out for. Like we mentioned, Lille obviously playing Dijon, who are mid-table side now and safe comfortably. Same with Toulouse facing a Bordeaux side, although they are in form. They're very far off of sort of getting a Europa League place at least. Strasbourg are facing a side that are desperate for Champions League football. Lyon with a victory here, if other results go their way, might seal it. They might also obviously still keep themselves in the driving seat with a victory here. And they have been the best side in Ligue over the last sort of 8 or so weeks. They've been absolutely tremendous, Sam. They're so dangerous. They can score goals everywhere. They've got Depay in form. They've got Traore scoring goals as well in form. They've got Fekir back. They seem structured. And against a Strasbourg side that seem to be just treading water is maybe the best way of describing it at the moment, really. They can't seem to buy a win anywhere, really. They got themselves in front against Rennes and ended up surrendering it anyway. They haven't won a game since they beat Troyes back in February. Are they slowly sliding into possibly that final sort of the sort of playoff place? Maybe they're the one that is slowly the one that Toulouse and others are looking at to maybe catch.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are. I think everything you've just described. I mean, the form that they're in is terrible. They've not won a game since February. They are just sleepwalking. All these draws, you kind of thought, well, they're doing enough to hold on. Their first half of the season was good enough. They had the points in the bag that meant that they were never going to be in this trouble. But now they are in this trouble. They're 17th. They're only a point above Toulouse. You got worse goal difference. I think Toulouse will get a point this weekend, as we'll find out when we get to predictions. I don't think Strasbourg will get a point here, which means they'll be in that playoff position going into the final weekend. And the fact that they've just not been able to pull out of this nosedive for such a long time is the reason they find themselves in this position. Strasbourg, really, it will be good for the league if they can stay up and establish themselves again as a big club, as a force to some extent, but they don't deserve it based on what they've done for the last 4 months.
Yeah, and it's a really tough game for them to go into, Adam. I mean, sometimes you do talk about playing teams at the top if they're maybe sliding out of form. You're thinking maybe someone like Monaco or someone with eyes elsewhere like Marseille, that maybe you can see Strasbourg at home, as they've proved earlier this season, that they can rouse their crowd and get a real result against big teams, but obviously beat Paris Saint-Germain as well at home, and got a point from Monaco, so gave Marseille a real game as well by beating them as well. So they have form in the same, but at the same time, they're facing a team that are focused, that are playing the best football they've played all season, and possibly the best football we've seen in Ligue 1 this season, even with Paris Saint-Germain being champions, but with a goal in mind that they know that if they win out, they will play Champions League football. And at that time, that's not kind of the team you really want to be facing when you're staring down the barrel.
No, it really isn't. I think that I think we've talked about Strasbourg, as you mentioned before, and timing their sort of slide at the right time. I think they may have just maybe sort of turning out, given Lille's form, they've just timed it completely the opposite of perfectly. And it just has the feeling that they're sort of slipping into that relegation playoff spot. Looking at the table, and you've got Caen on 37 points, they're 2 games to go. They feel like they're not safe, but they're not far off being there. Lille are suddenly in form, and they've won the last 2. They should be okay-ish. So it kind of comes down to the fact that with Metz already gone and Troyes looking pretty desperate, it's sort of between Toulouse and Strasbourg a little bit for that relegation playoff spot. And I'm with Sam. I think Toulouse could get something from this weekend, and over the last 2 games, Strasbourg are going to be struggling to find enough points to stay above them. They've got Lyon here, obviously, and what's their final game? They're going to Nantes, so so obviously not the worst by any means, but away from home they've been pretty poor as well. So it's by no means a guarantee, and Toulouse will probably fancy themselves a little bit this weekend, and home to Gangon next weekend. I kind of fancy them to win that game. So, given that Gangon are out of the Europa League contention now, mid-table, Toulouse are pretty decent enough at home. So it kind of feels like Strasbourg need to pull something out in one of these two games, and I don't really see them doing it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny one, isn't it? I mean, I think what will happen is they will hope that other results sort of trend the right way for them this weekend. For example, maybe Toulouse don't, maybe only grab a point or do lose, and Troyes lose and almost send themselves down. But even if they do lose this one, the hope is that Nantes are in such a free fall and such a horrible place at the moment that even at home they struggled against Montpellier last weekend, and they've been in a terrible form that maybe with them thinking that Ranieri's going, although I don't quite believe the reports locally that they might be going to Tottenham. I don't think that might be the case, even if Pochettino was to go. I can't imagine that Strasbourg will be looking at that game and thinking that that's the one they need to maybe focus on. If it starts to get out of hand in this game against Lyon at the weekend, maybe they go 2-0 down early. Maybe they go, right, we'll sort of sack this game off because they're such a tough team. Let's focus on that Nantes game. If we get 3 points there, as long as other results sort of go our way, then we've still got plenty of chance. Because even if Toulouse win, Toulouse will only be 2 points above them, and then they have a Gangon, but at least that's a chance for them. You think that maybe Toulouse, well, I personally think, I know Strasbourg have been pretty poor away from home, but I don't trust Nantes with anything really at the moment. But let's get some predictions of this one. So Sam, what do you think?
I think this is probably going to end up a pretty easy Lyon win. They haven't conceded a goal in the last two games. I think they might concede one here and probably win 3-1.
Adam?
Yeah, I think Lyon too. Maybe 3-2, because I remember that 3-3 game with Marseille. There tend to be quite a few goals in these sort of games for Strasbourg at home. So 3-2 Lyon.
I'm going to go for this one being the surprise result of the weekend, and I think this will be a 2-2 draw. I think Strasbourg might nick something on this, and if they do, that might just be. It obviously will make them not have to, unless Troyes won. Obviously, that would keep them away from automatic relegation, but it might just give them a little bit of a boost heading into that Nantes game and potential to win that one at least. That's all for this week. My thanks to Adam, Sam, and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the main show back on Monday. But for now, enjoy your weekend of football.